Hi everyone, welcome to Wargaming Parrot. I am David and today's video is all about cockatiel night frights. Now, I thought I'd do this video as we recently had a night fright and it was one that caused fish some minor injury, and I felt that it was important to do a video on this specific topic rather than general parrot fear, so cockatiel owners can be aware of why it happens, how it happens, and what you can do when it happens. If I start off with what actually is a night fright. Well, a night fright is when your cockatiel during the night, as the name implies, will get scared during the night and start flapping around and generally acting very fearful. This can sometimes lead to injury, this can sometimes be minor, it does vary, and sometimes cockatiels can inspire each other to night frights, so it will go on for longer because there's more of them. And it's something that will happen to almost every cockatiel at some point during its life. It may even be the case that you don't even notice it because you're elsewhere in the house, and then you come in the morning and there's feathers on the floor of the cage because they've had a night fright. So it is important to be aware of them and to try and prevent them because they can lead to injury. Now, the traditional view of night frights is people just kind of ignored them, that it was just something that cockatiels did. They were like, oh, what a silly bird, and you just leave it alone. However, it is important that you don't ignore them and that you do actually look at them because they can lead to injury, as I said. So it's important to know what to do when they happen and to deal with them. I also thought it'd be quite interesting to share the traditional view of night frights. So I used to do research into folklore around birds and other animals, and traditionally cockatiels were kept as pets in many countries because they were seen as guardians against spirits. And you can kind of see where this comes from. So people would keep their cockatiels, and during the night, for seemingly no reason, that cockatiel would have a night fright and start flapping around. So being superstitious back in the olden days, people would assume that the cockatiel has sensed a spirit and they would be able to take action to prevent that. It depends on your beliefs, but the modern view is we know some of the causes of what happens, but the root cause of why it remains somewhat of a mystery. Now we've gone into a bit of the background to what is a night fright and, well, some of the traditional views around it. I'm going to go into the causes, some of the solutions, preventative measures you can take, and what you can do when a night fright is actually happening. I want to talk about the causes of night frights because there are numerous and it's important to be aware of what can cause them. The most common causes for night frights are sudden noises in the night or sudden shifts and movements. Say for example you have some drunks walking around outside and they are yelling. That can potentially cause a night fright. Similarly with someone honking their car horn from far away. Sudden shifts and noises, for example if the environment's changed recently in your house, that can cause a night fright. Or sudden noises in a house or sudden lights. For example, maybe even putting a hallway light on when they're unused to it, flashing lights and sirens outside, all sorts of things like that can cause night frights. Stress can also be a factor in causing night frights. If your cockatiel has recently come home, or there are stresses in the environment, they're plucking, all sorts of things like that, that can potentially lead to more frequent night frights. So it's also important to be aware of how stressed your cockatiel is and how that is impacting on their environment and lifestyle. Other animals and people can also trigger night frights. In a past example, we had a guest staying over and that caused a major night fright for fish. In their lifetime, I can certainly say they've only ever had 2 major night frights, which we're glad to hear because a lot of the things we do to prevent them are working. And yeah, other people just not being aware of what can be going on, making movements during the night, not putting a light on, not respecting that your birds are going to be scared. Other animals, for example, a dog or a cat moving around during the night, scrabbling and making noises, can also cause night frights. And then this leads me to my final point on causes. Sometimes they can just have them. And that's probably due to not enough study into it and people not observing them enough because, you know, you can't stay up all night watching them. It's useful to set up cameras maybe and watch them, and I'm quite sure some people have tried this, but they can just have them. And when that happens, it's not ideal, but there are still some preventative measures you can take to try and prevent them. Now I've covered causes, and leading on from my last point in causes, how do you prevent a night fright? How do you try and mitigate what happens with them? And the very first thing I'd recommend to all cockatiel owners is getting a night light. Night lights are so useful in preventing night frights because your cockatiel can see what's going on around them. It almost simulates what it'd be like in the natural environment because you'd have a bit of moonlight, have a little bit of light coming through, they're better to see what's going on. So a nice sort of like dull light, for example from a night light, which I'll show you examples of in a moment, is very useful because if something does shift or something's moving around, they can see what it is and they can be like, it's just that, it's nothing to be scared of. Now these are the night lights we use. We have a nice plug-in night light which comes on automatically when things get dark. We find it's very useful, but because it's on the floor, it doesn't really illuminate as well as other things, so you could have a plug elsewhere. And then we have a little chick which we can turn on and adjust the lighting for, and we have that on a table in their room. And between the two of them, they're very useful for illuminating the room and making sure that the cockatiels know what's going on around them, making them less likely to have a night fright. Both of these are available on my Amazon store, and you can check them out. And there's loads of other night lights you can get, so do just have a little browse, because there's all different shapes and sizes, and you may find one that appeals to you and that'll be useful. Another solution you can adopt is stopping cage covering. Cage covering can lead to more night frights because it creates that enclosed environment and they can't see what's going on outside. So if you are covering the cage, some people recommend to cover the cage to prevent night frights, and while that may eliminate a sight aspect of it, there's a sudden sound, it's more likely to occur. Again, this is going to be down to you to decide what you want to do. My recommendation is to not cover or to partially cover. So if you want to continue covering your cockatiel's cage, just partially cover it. For example, the top third. That way the light from a night light can come in, they can see what's going on, and a sudden noise is less likely to startle them and cause one. Another very useful thing you can do to try and prevent night frights is building your cockatiel's confidence. That means doing lots of desense work during the day. When I talk about desense, that means exposing them to do new things, new sounds, all sorts of things to make sure you build up their confidence. And this is very effective in helping with lots of problems, because cockatiels can be quite flighty, and the more confident they are, the better life they're going to have. Another fairly easy tip for preventing night frights is in the room they're in, just make sure you have a quick check just before you put them to bed, and make sure there's nothing loose, nothing that's going to shift in a night. For example, a controller sitting on top of a console that may just shift and fall off, or something that's on display. Just make sure everything is nice and secure. So it's just an easy way of eliminating one of the most common causes, which is something falling over and causing them a little scare. There is one other thing that some people adopt, and it seems to be quite effective, and that is either playing white noise machines or just having some sort of generic sounds, for example thunderstorm sounds playing overnight. We used thunderstorm sounds and stuff to calm our birds and get them relaxed as well, so it can be very effective if you want to consider doing that as well. Now we've covered what a night fright is, what the causes are, and some of the preventative measures you can take. I'd like to talk about what you can actually do when one is occurring and what to do. The first thing I want to say is do not ignore it, because it can lead to injury and it can be very serious. Most of the time it'll probably be fine. However, that's an isolated time where your cockatiel gets their wing caught in the bars, or they bash themselves and you just leave it. Do not ignore it, make sure you react to it, because it's so important. So when your cockatiel having a night fright and you notice it, react quickly. So get into the room and then turn the light on. After you've turned the light on, keep your movements nice and slow, go over to them and try to calm them. This can mean just making shushy noises, whatever you want, just keep the light on and be calm. The worst thing you can do is not turn the light on and go in there, because it's going to be scary, it's going to be shape moving around, and it can exacerbate it and make it worse. So go in, react to it, turn the light on, go over and start calming them down. So once you've calmed them down, it's important to sit with them and spend some time with them, because it may take a little bit of time for them to settle. It's also very important to check them for any injuries, because it's very common for cockatiels to graze themselves or potentially pull out a feather during a night fright. So if you can give them a little sort of health check, you can prevent any of these issues now. It's possible they may be bleeding. If so, it's well worth having a birdie first aid kit on hand. I have a video on birdie first aid kits, which I'll leave a card for now, and I've got bits and pieces in my Amazon store that you can pick up, and some of them are available all over the place. Clearly our birds have a very strong opinion on this, because it's very important to keep your cockatiels happy and safe. But yes, have a bird first aid kit on hand too. Now, I mentioned health checking them, making sure they're okay, but it's very important you do not get them out, because if they're still scared, they could end up flapping around and injuring themselves. So make sure they stay in a cage and then perform that health check and treat any injuries if necessary. If you do have to get them out to treat an injury, make sure you're very aware that they could be scared, and just try to be nice, slow and gentle with them. Having extra treats on hand can be useful, because then you can keep them distracted with treats while you do whatever you need to do to make sure they're okay. I just wanted to talk briefly about what happened recently and what prompted this video. As I said, we've only ever had maybe 2 major night frights. We've had some others, but they've never really amounted to much. The first one was caused by that guest in the past. The most recent one, we're not sure what caused it. And yeah, it led to fish losing some of his feathers. Now he's currently in a molt, so none of the feathers were blood feathers and they're probably going to come out anyway. However, due to the night fright, all of those feathers were lost suddenly, which means he now can't fly properly because one of his wings is missing most of his primary feathers, and it takes a lot of time for them to grow back in, which means we have to be supervising their outings a lot more closely and making sure that he doesn't try to fly and hurt himself. And it's just not an ideal situation. If you can prevent it and mitigate it, it's just so important. And I'm going to show you a fish's wing in a moment, just so you can see what a night fright can cause. Luckily, Mr. Chip lost maybe 1 feather only, and he had a very bit of minor grazing to one of his wings, but he's completely fine now. However, Mr. Fish, it's going to take a little bit of time to recover, even though the feathers were going to go anyway. But it stresses them out, and it's so unpleasant for them, and it's unpleasant for us as well, as people who look after cockatiels, because we don't want to see our birds distressed, and if you can stop that, it's just so important. So Sophie's just holding the boys here. They're very in good spirits now. They recovered pretty quickly and they're pretty happy. Chip, as you can see, has lost no major feathers. It's a shame I couldn't have recorded that, but if you look at Fish here, he's lost a lot of primary feathers on his wing, and he's trying to fly and he's having difficulty. Now, because it's been a day since this happened, they're pretty happy now. There's no like grazes or major injuries, but yeah, it's just very difficult for fish to fly. And while, as I said in the video, a lot of these feathers were going to be molted out anyway, having them happen all at once, it's just very stressful for him, and yeah, it's just not very fun for the poor little guy. So we're hoping they're going to grow out quickly, and in the meantime we're just going to be keeping a closer eye on him so he doesn't hurt himself. So guys, thank you very much for watching this video. I hope you found it useful in preventing cockatiel night frights. If you have any questions, please feel free to drop them down below. But in the meantime, take care and have a really good day.